The title of my talk comes actually from my hometown in southern Indiana. And we'll show you where that is on a map, assuming it's actually on a map somewhere. It's not on most maps. But when I had the opportunity to write something, John and I both ended up here in the frozen tundra. In the past decade, I came here in 2012 to teach down at the University of Minnesota Morris. And when I realized he was up here, it was kind of astonishing that two people from the same tiny little place in middle of nowhere, Indiana, both ended up in this part of the world. And it's really cool that this has happened, and then the chance to write for an artist of his quality. I mean, the reason I am a composer and a low brass player today, I'm a euphoniumist, trombonist, and a composer and a theorist, is because in 5th grade I heard him play. And, John, if me reading a book makes you want to read that book, hearing you play made me want to do something different, because I knew there was no way I could ever hang with this person as a pianist. But we've spent a lot of time together. We've been very good friends for a very long time, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to write for a performer of his level. So, Pinhook Piano, the composition and construction of the Concerto for Piano and Wind Band. I'd like to dedicate this talk and this performance to the memory of Barbara Gibson Elliott Scull. Miss Elliott was our first band director in 6th grade, and she passed away less than a year ago at the age of 95, which is pretty remarkable that she lived that long, considering she had both of us as students. But it is because of her that we both ended up as wind band musicians, so arguably she is the genesis of this whole project. And because if I hadn't gotten into band, I certainly wouldn't be writing concertos for piano with wind band. And so this is for Miss Elliott, who got us started down this path. So, background and influences on the work. So, Lawrence County, Indiana is, I describe the county seat, Bedford, as being 35 miles south of and 75 years behind Bloomington, which is the home of Indiana University, a place also very near and dear to arts, as we'll talk about a little later on. Pinhook is about 8 miles southeast of the county seat. You can kind of see it just under the C in Lawrence. Yeah, it is literally 19 people. My hometown has 19 people. I grew up related to 16 of them. Prom was weird. But I've known John since 5th grade, about 1983, and I know this is what all the students are here looking for. The next slide will have a picture, yes. Yeah, well, let's just go right to it, shall we? The black and white picture is from our choir, our sophomore year of high school. Sweaters were a thing back then. I'm not sure what that's about. And then those are our senior pictures. And you can thank or blame Lisa Wheeler, who's a classmate of ours, and my brother Brad for getting the senior pictures there. But I've known him for a very long time, and I've always just been absolutely bowled over by his talent. At a young age, junior high, high school age, he was playing works that I couldn't even comprehend. And that is really where the heart of this, because one of the influences on this concerto is this piece, Rachmaninov Prelude in C-sharp minor, Opus 3, number 2. It has a very famous opening, and it's the only part of the piece I can actually play because it doesn't actually involve a whole lot of but I'm going to play it just so you hear it, and you'll hear this again in the concerto. Thunderous. A thunderous opening, and it stuck with me all these years because he'd come over to my house, we'd hang out, and my father is not a man who likes loud noises. That opening is kind of loud. So, being a typical 13, 14, 15-year-old. I didn't particularly want to make Dad too comfortable. So I'd say, hey, do the Rachmaninoff. So, and it would always, and the 1945 story in Clark that my parents had received as a wedding present, which was grossly out of tune. But man, it was loud, and it would always elicit the desired reaction from Dad, which was anger. And for the record, so this is Sergei Rachmaninoff standing in front of a car that's parked in front of a building, and this is my dad standing in front of a car parked in front of a building. I was so happy when I found this picture of Rachmaninoff, by the way. Dad has mellowed somewhat. I mentioned that I was going to talk about him in this talk, and the Rachmaninoff says, "Oh yeah, that really loud thing he always played, wasn't it?" Dad's 87 and still with it. It's kind of nice. I'll be calling him later this afternoon. I'm sure he'll get a kick out of that. The other kind of influence on this was ragtime, because John and I both, for a time, studied with a teacher who did a lot of ragtime performance, and I'll be talking about that a little later on as well. Of course, what makes ragtime work is the syncopation. You have a very steady left hand, and God only knows what's going on in the right hand. So a little example, again, this is literally the only part of this I can still play after 30 years, but all right, that's all I got. There's merchandise available in the lobby. So because we had that shared connection as well, I knew that part of this was going to feature some ragtime. And so those were the starting points. So let's talk about the form of it a little bit. I teach music theory for a living, so this is you can tell that that's what I do, portion of the program. So the first movement, which is entitled With Apologies to Rachmaninoff, usually in a classical era concerto, and for those of you who are keeping score at the home game, that would be piano concertos written between roughly 1770 and 1850, with some extensions on either side. There are certain thematic and key relationships that are present in sonata allegro form. The first theme is in the home key, second theme is in either the major, or the dominant if it's a major key, or the relative major if it's a minor key. In concertos, you got something a little different because you have to have the double exposition, where the orchestra, the accompanying ensemble, does the entire exposition but doesn't modulate, and then the soloist comes in, and that's where you have all the modulations. And then you get to a development section where the various themes fight it out and figure out what's going on, and then you get to the recapitulation where everything stays in the tonic key. And in concertos, it usually means that you have some combination of the forces, because you had the double exposition earlier, and you have to make some adaptations and things like that. That's operating under the assumption that the source material is traditionally tonal. This is not. So some of the elements of sonata allegro form are present here, but not all. And how they manipulate themselves is a little different. So the first theme starts with the thunderous chords, the thunderous octaves that I played earlier, and then the motives and the wind band. Mei is going to have to do her best impression of a wind band. I don't know if she has a marching band uniform backstage or not, but the motive, da dee da 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 da, is built on a line from Opus 3, number 2 itself. And it's a very slow, broad opening, and it picks up a little bit, and there's some octaves. And then when you get to the second part of the primary theme, it's kind of these little denser chords. The tempo is a little faster. You'll hear it in C sharp minor. We're still staying in the home key at this point. And then we move on to the transition, which is how we get from the first to the second theme, which takes that same theme that we just heard, the second part of the primary theme, moves it into G sharp minor, and then we get into the second theme. It's this very sweeping, notice the tempo is dropped down to 72 beats a minute, big arpeggiations in the left hand, very lyrical theme in the right hand, It gets passed back and forth between the hands. Then the second part of the second theme is kind of ethereal, kind of these Whitaker-esque crunch chords. They're just, and then there's this wonderful sweeping section that forms the beginning of the closing theme. Then we have a little coda that starts with an acceleration before we get into the development section. So if you're keeping score, now we're at the development section. Why, yes, the Super Bowl is today. That's why I'm talking about keeping score. Spent several years in Cincinnati, so hoo day. Begin the development section, which pulls a lot of its source from that primary theme part 2, the ba-ba-ba-ba-dee-da. And it's only about 15 measures. It's not a super long section, but it ends, there's a big tremolo that John's just going to see him wailing up there, and then half-step motive that turns back into the big octaves from the opening. The difference in the recapitulation is the 1B and 2B themes are gone. I figure you've had enough of the 1B theme through the transition in the development section. And then the B theme for 2 just didn't seem like it needed to make the cut. It's much shorter comparatively, and then that leads into a cadenza, which is just John by himself for a few measures before we get into the coda, which features the ending of the original Opus 3 number 2 etude, but with the little arpeggiations added in the accompaniment section. So that's the first movement. It's my postmodern take on sonata allegro form. For the second movement, Cavatina Quarantina, you can tell I wrote this fairly recently. A cavatina is an aria in 1 or 2 short sections without repeats. Well, I went in a slightly different direction. And this is the overall form. There's even a false, what I call a false development section, where you think we're going to do the whole development section thing again. And then I said, no, we're done. That's something I actually swiped from Beethoven, who does it a couple of times. The one I'm thinking of is in the Ninth Symphony, the Scherzo of the Ninth Symphony, the bump-a-dump, bump-a-dump. That movement, he leads you back into the trio. I think you're going to have to go through the whole trio again. And he's like, no, just kidding. If you're going to steal from the best. That's the way I look at it. So, and then there's the interlude. The 3B rag. This is where the ragtime comes into play. 3B does not mean the B flats or B naturals on the keyboards, although I do end up using them. Bedford, Bloomington, and Bogstown, Indiana. Bedford is, of course, the county seat of Lawrence County, where we grew up. The closest thing passes for a town in Lawrence County. Bloomington, where John took some piano lessons, and of course the home of Indiana University, the home of TIS Bookstore. We were reminiscing this morning at brunch about TIS Bookstore, which was sort of the Indiana University bookstore. And just for people like us, you know, coming in from the provinces like that, to walk into a place that had all of those books and all that music, it was overwhelming. And it was wonderful, and it showed that there was a way, there was a different path, and we desperately needed a different path. So Bloomington is a place that's important to us. And then Bogstown is a grease spot somewhere outside of Indianapolis. I think it's in Shelby County. It's nothing. It makes Pinhook look large. But for whatever reason, there's a little restaurant there that at the time had ragtime shows. It's like 2 spinet pianos set up, and people would just come in and play rags and tell dirty jokes and you know, just everything you'd expect from a little hole-in-the-wall place like that. And John and one of his teachers would perform up there. When he was in high school, which I'm pretty sure would violate child labor laws today, but it was such an integral part of his musical experience, and I wanted to capture a little bit of that. So, and I like ragtime too. I like that interplay. So, because this is a concerto for piano and wind band, the accompaniment in that movement is actually going to be just a tuba. And the reason I chose tuba was John also played tuba in high school. Now, I wasn't going to ask him to do both at the same time. So whichever Mei is playing there, that's just going to be a tuba. And it's basically intro, ABA, coda. Ragtime has that steady rhythm. So of course, me being me, I throw in a couple of 3/8 and 5/8 bars just to kind of turn it around every now and then. So that's the interlude. And that segues directly into the fourth movement, Chorale and Moto Perpetuo. Starts with this chorale theme in more or less D major. That's actually starts in measure 2 because it is possible to do the concerto without the interlude, in which case you just start on measure 2 of the final movement. And then a restatement of the chorale with some emendations. And then you have this, starting at letter JJ there, second chorale theme, which just moves in a slightly different direction, and it's also where the piano solo comes in with some filigree and ornamentation. And then we have the introduction to the Moto Perpetuo. He's been playing sextuplets, 6 notes per beat. They have to go down to quintuplets, and then churn the beat, change the tempo so the beat is now 4 of those instead of 5. So I'm kind of evil like that. And then the first Moto theme, it just sounds like bebop piano from hell. It's beautiful. I love it. Then the return of the chorales with piano obbligato, and then a second Moto Perpetuo theme starts in the accompaniment. And this one also features what I call crashing triplets. While the accompanist is just keeping the steady thing going, John is up here just bum, 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 bum. They sound like they're not related to each other at all. I'm a big fan of Charles Ives, and that's where that comes from. And I actually told them during rehearsal, ignore each other during this section. You just do this, you just do that. Pay no mind to what the other person is doing, and then just line it up here. And so I kind of enjoy the chaos. It's fun. And then there's a return of the first Moto, the bebop piano thing, and then sort of the inversion of the Rachmaninov. Instead of going down, it goes up, and it just speeds up into the first coda. And it should read coda 2. There's always a typo. The best way to find a typo is to give the presentation. That should read coda 2 there. And then it features just these very fast piano lines again, and then closes with the crashing triplets, and then a huge D. So we've kind of moved from C sharp up to D over the course of the concerto. It's kind of cool. Now you'll notice it's called Concerto for Piano and Wind Band, and that's not a wind band up there. It's pretty standard practice to create reductions of the accompaniment for purposes just like this. This is the instrumentation as I conceptualize. I've been listening to a lot of Alfred Reed, who was a big band composer back when John and I were coming up. I conceptualized it as a large band, and some of these parts are optional. And as I'm writing this and I'm conceptualizing it as a large band, I can hear the number of performances I can actually get out of it dropping, because it's finding larger bands is not always easy. There are optional parts. It can be rescored. Chat with me afterwards. We'll see what we can do. And I could even do a version for orchestra if you want. But the instrumentation of the wind band, like I said, we're all wind band guys, and the sounds of the wind band, they're as much a part of me as anything else. It was my first musical love, really. And so this is an homage to all of that great wind literature that we played over the years. We had a very good high school band director, and so we got to play the good stuff. And I wanted to write something that would go into the good stuff. And so this is what we came up with. So that's the concerto. That's how we're doing this. So any questions? Make it quick. There's a game this afternoon. My wife is down front giving me signals like, wrap it up, there's a game. All right, so. Well, let's enjoy the show then. Thank you so much, and thank you to John for being such a great friend and commissioning such a work that was such an honor to write and to get to work with you. And thanks to Mei for assisting. And my goodness, what an incredible artist she is as well. And you know, it's just an honor. And thank you for coming. Thank you for opening up your institution. And I feel very welcome here. And I'm glad. Thank you. you.